What's going on, guys? My name's Lior and welcome back to my channel. Now, in this video, I thought I would do a video talking about, is it still worth it to buy an investment property around the greater Boston area today? Obviously, within the last year, there's been so much funkiness going on between COVID, everything with politics, and the way it's played out in the Boston real estate market. But consistently, I still get the same question over and over again, is with all of that stuff going on, should I still potentially consider buying a rental property around the area? Now, outside of like the big factors, like I said, COVID and everything else, I think there's some real local factors within the greater Boston area that you need to understand to decide whether it's still worth buying an investment property. And those factors include everything from where in the greater Boston you're going to be buying, what's going to be happening with Boston over the next 6 months with colleges, right? Our college is going to be back in session in the fall semester of 2021. And what's your general outlook on the Boston market over the next 2 to 4 years with everything going on? So in this video, I'm kind of going to break down those factors for you so that you can kind of decide for yourself if this is something that's still worthwhile for you. And that way you can make the best decision. So with that, let's get at it. What's going on, guys? My name's Lior and I'm with Compass out of Boston. And as I said, I'm excited to make this video to kind of give you guys some of the factors you should consider if you're considering buying rental property around the greater Boston area. Now, before I get into that, 2 quick things. Number 1, if this is your first time on my channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button. I put out tons of new videos every single week talking about lifestyle all over greater Boston area, tips on buying, selling, and investing, highlights of everything to do with Boston. So if that's the kind of videos you want to see, make sure you subscribe. And number 2, guys, if you guys are thinking about doing anything with real estate around the greater Boston area, whether it's buying, selling, investing, whatever it is, I still get blown away by how many calls I get week in and week out from you guys watching my videos. And I absolutely love it. So if you've been thinking about doing anything with real estate, make sure you hit me up on email, text, Instagram, whatever method works for you, and I will definitely help you out. So with that, let's get right into it. And one of the most common calls I get from potential real estate investors around the Boston area is, you might be diversified into things like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, even potentially Bitcoin. I know some of you guys out there are very big on that. And maybe you're a little sick of the whole market volatility that's been going on between COVID, politics, and everything in between. And you've thought about potentially jumping into real estate to kind of get something a little bit more stable that maybe produces some cash flow as well. And even though I think it's a great idea, I wanted to highlight 4 key factors you need to understand and make sure you're comfortable with in order to think about whether it makes sense for you to jump in the investment game here around the area. And those 4 factors that we're going to talk about are going to be, number 1, what are the risks of rents getting paid with everything going on with evictions? Number 2, the massively increased vacancy rates we've seen around the greater Boston area. Number 3, what are the chances that Boston bounces back as a rental market as universities potentially open up their doors again in this fall semester of 2021? And number 4, your 2 to 3, 4 year outlook on the Boston market as a whole, with all of the factors getting played out right now. So let's jump into each of these factors and really break these down. So let's start with number 1. And this is probably one of the biggest factors I get asked about, which is, hey, I know there's been a bunch of eviction moratoriums passed in Boston. There's been one passed nationally as well. What are the chances that I buy an investment property and my tenants don't pay, right? And that's a very, very fair question in this environment, especially in especially in a state like Massachusetts that's so tenant friendly and so anti-landlord, right? And here's the thing, if you're gonna be buying property, let's say you're gonna buy a rental property that already has tenants in it, one of the ways you can really protect yourselves is by conducting really careful due diligence, right? So basically anytime we go evaluate an investment property, whether it's me buying for myself or whether it's an investor client that I have, right? One of the things I always ask for the last year is proof of rental payments being made by the current tenants, right? So, while we're under due diligence, I'll literally ask the seller, hey, can you show me proof that the last 4 to 5 months of rent has been paid by all of your tenants? Now, this is not a perfect science. Sometimes you're gonna get landlords throwing out like, well, they pay cash, or no, I don't have the receipts or whatever. But a lot of times we do get that information. So that's just one of the first things I would do to really get a comfort sense of what's going on with this property. Are the tenants paying here? Now, if you're going to be buying an investment property and maybe you have a unit vacant or a couple of units vacant, and you're going to be actually putting in your own tenants, on the screening process of putting in tenants, there's obviously really good practice in terms of criteria that potential applicants need to meet. And it's going to be really, really important you're very, very focused on this criteria in this kind of environment, right? So typically we evaluate things like credit score. We look at income sources, right? So the rule of thumb is you typically want 3x the income as it is rent, right? So all of these factors you're really going to want to scrutinize, even maybe looking at where the tenants are employed, right? So maybe if they're in the hospitality industry or restaurant industry, that could be a little bit of a riskier tenant than someone maybe employed in tech, right? So you can really get into the weeds and really screen these tenants out to really give yourself more of a comfort level that these tenants are truly going to pay their rent on time. And of course, probably one of the biggest factors in terms of getting good tenants and tenants that are likely going to be paying on time really comes down to a function of market, right? So if you're going to be buying and leasing out property in like prime time areas like Cambridge, Back Bay, South End, or something like that, right? Where obviously it's one of the pricier areas of all Boston. You're probably going to be attracting professionals, people in tech, doctors, lawyers, right? People with really, really stable incomes. And obviously with that kind of tenant base, your probability of not collecting rent certainly goes down. Now, as you get into quote unquote worse and worse markets, right? You're gonna have to be more cognizant of that, right? If you're gonna be renting to more blue collar folks, depending again on the exact market, the types of jobs they have, those are some of the things you're gonna wanna consider as well. Now, factor number 2 that I brought up that you're gonna wanna consider is the increased vacancy rates. Now, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Units that maybe pre-COVID were renting out within a week or two around Greater Boston today can easily sit for 2, 3, 4, 5 months vacant. I mean, that's certainly not common. I've had a vacancy in one of my units that's been sitting empty for almost 3-4 months now. It is a slow rental market out there, and vacancy is quite high, right? So the point to you as an investor is, if you're going to be buying an investment property, maybe it's a condo or maybe it's a multifamily that has one or multiple units vacant, make sure you adjust for that, right? So make sure that you can still easily float your mortgage payments month to month, even if you don't necessarily get the tenants in as fast as you think you are, right? So, if you're buying a 3-family and you're inheriting 1 or 2 tenants, make sure that you can still float the mortgage with that rent, or, if you've got additional money to be able to float it for the next 3 to 4 months, right? Because you just don't want to get in the situation where you unexpectedly didn't realize you're going to have this large vacancy, and now all of a sudden you're going to struggle to make mortgage payments, right? So that's no good for anyone. You may also want to be prepared to offer things like concessions, right? So, in a market like this where rentals move slower, typically more and more landlords start offering concessions like 1 or 2 months free rent, like maybe pet incentives or whatever, right? So you're gonna probably have to get pretty creative in terms of your offers to potential tenant applicants. Now, number 3 factor to consider and think about is figuring out what you think is going to happen in kind of the summer/fall in the Greater Boston area with schools, right? Because one big reason why the rental market got hurt this year is because most universities went completely shut down and went mobile or are only partially on site, right? And obviously that's a huge chunk of potential tenants. That's why markets like Brookline, Brighton, Allston, and even in downtown Boston have all suffered because students tend to be a very big chunk of the rental market in Boston. So depending on exactly what plays out, if universities make the call that by fall 2021, with a vaccine being rolled around, they're going to be comfortable completely reopening on site. That's going to be a major bump in the rental market. I mean, if that happens, I do think we're going to see the rental market bounce back very hard. Vacancy rates will decrease very quickly. So you just have to evaluate that potential. If they continue in 2021, in the fall of 2021, to operate mainly remote, and they still don't let students on site, we'll probably have a similar rental market continue throughout the fall. And again, a lot of this is obviously in conjunction with how effective the vaccine is, and how quickly it gets rolled around. So you want to be kind of thinking about those factors as you think about a potential investment move. And of course, factor number 4 is beyond just the next, year outlook with COVID in Boston area. You also want to get pretty comfortable what your outlook is on the Boston market over the next 2 to 3 and 4 years, right? Because hopefully within 2 years, we're somewhat back to normal and, COVID is kind of just a bad memory. The question still becomes, do you want to be invested in a market like Boston for the next number of years, right? I've done plenty of other videos where I've talked about why I am so incredibly high on the long-term potential of Boston market. I mean, the economic diversity here is out of control, it's just unreal. We have so many industries here. There's so much capital in Boston. So between all those factors, I am incredibly high on the long-term potential of Boston. But you want to make sure if you're evaluating a potential investment in real estate, remember, you're certainly buying property, but you're really investing into the market, right? That's really what you're investing into. So make sure you're comfortable and really like your outlook of the greater Boston market, because that's probably going to have the biggest impact on your investment success. So hopefully that helps, guys. Again, those are the 4 factors I would really think about today if I was thinking about making a new investment into real estate. Again, between the factors of conducting due diligence on rentals and whether you're going to be able to collect rents, to considering the increased vacancy rates, and then obviously considering the 1-year outlook and the 3-4 year outlook between COVID and everything else in Boston. Make sure you get super comfortable with this before deciding to pull the trigger on buying an investment property. I do think there's a crap ton of potential out here today, especially in Boston, but you just want to make sure you get super educated and super comfortable with all the risks as well as the upside opportunity in real estate. So hopefully that helps, guys. If you guys have any questions, just shoot them below.